Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome into Take Command. Logan Paulsen is back. I'm Grant Paulsen. We're with you for a new installment as we look back at what has been 11 games for the Commanders, take inventory on where they're at this season, and look at some of the big topics of the week, including the return of Jayden Daniels. Of course, on Thursday, we'll drop a new episode for you, looking ahead to Sunday Night Football and the Denver Broncos as the Commanders come out of the bye. Remember, you can watch the show on YouTube, 106.7 The Fan, Team 980 channels, and please subscribe, rate, review, comment, do all those things that help us out wherever you get your audio. Logan, little bye weekend with the fam. How are things?
Things are good, man. Got a little 8-year-old soccer in and some hockey down in Virginia Beach. So it was good busy weekend, but good to spend some time with the family. How about you? Get some stuff done or what? Are you talking to Ben Standing on Sunday, apparently? Yeah,
that's right. Ben and I broke down the whole league, every game, got people a new episode in their feed, talked about the Commanders' outlook the rest of the way. And, that was a good time. We caught up and enjoyed ourselves, sticked it up a little bit. But, things are good, man. I'm ready for the stretch run, recharge the batteries a little bit. Got 6 games to go here for Washington. I want to start with the news that came out on Monday, and that is that Jayden Daniels is going to return to practice. In fact, he already has, but he's going to do more and more as the week goes on. He has not been cleared for contact, and so it's being called a long shot for him to play against the Broncos. Still pretty amazing, the recovery here, when you think about how gruesome that elbow dislocation looked and the fear initially that there were tears and maybe his season was over. But at least as of right now, the trajectory would make you think he might be able to come back a week after the Denver game in Minneapolis against the Vikings. If that's the case, that would give him 5 games left, 5 weeks of practice. That's a lot of football, more than a quarter of a season, essentially, or right around there, almost a third of a season for him to be able to come back and play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, obviously the injury looked disastrous when it happened, but I think, the more research that you and I did on it, we kind of realized that if you kind of dodge the bullet of the ligament, like disastrous ligament tears, because you always tear a ligament when you just look at an elbow, but as long as it wasn't bad, there's going to be a shot for him to come back. And so I think that it's cool to see him kind of with an opportunity to play some football down the stretch, to build to bank some reps. I really think that's one of the most important things about this returning from injury when he's going to, is that you're going to get some reps. And now against that Minnesota defense, that's going to be tough, but I do think I want to see him get reps. I want to see him improve on some things from earlier in the season and from last year. So I think this is great. And, obviously I'm a huge fan of Jayden Daniels, so I just want to see him play. I think that's the other thing too that I'm excited about.
Well, the Minnesota defense is no treat. There's no doubt about that. But at least it's not the Denver defense.
That's true.
At least he doesn't have to come back and play the Broncos. We'll let Marcus handle that one. The number 1 defense in the NFL, number 1 in sacks by far. I mean, they just live in the backfield. So if he was coming back after weeks of not playing as kind of a rusty quarterback to play the Broncos, that would feel like a nightmare. It's not like Minnesota is going to be a walk in the park, but it's a level down for sure. You go from the number 1 defense in the league to the number 7 defense in the league.
Minnesota's number 7. I mean, I think the thing about Minnesota when you watch them, both defenses are amazing. So for full stop, but the Minnesota one is just, I don't really get what they're doing all the time. It's just like kind of feast or famine, lots of pressures, 8-man drops, zone pressures, simulated pressures. Just feels like he's just Flores is just throwing whatever he can at the wall. And he does a good job, and it really disrupts and is confusing for quarterbacks. So, going to be a tough matchup whenever he comes back, but, just excited to see him.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, let's look at his season so far. 11 games for the Commanders. Obviously, Jayden Daniels has dealt with 3 different injuries and has now missed time multiple times. So he has not played in all 11 of those games. But for him, it's 6 starts. The team's gone 2-4. He's completed 62% of his passes, 7 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns and 2 picks. So if you're comparing him to that historical, incredible rookie of the year, never before seen campaign, in terms of yards per game, it's down about 12 per. His rating's down about 6 points. His QBR is down about 16 points. Sack percentage is up. Like, the good stuff is down. The bad stuff is up a little bit. It still feels like he's been very solid, though. It feels like this is not like, oh, this is perilous. He's had a bad year. I think he's just been regular good. He's been at times very good. Just hasn't been at that elite MVP caliber level of last year. How would you sum up his season for someone who hasn't watched his 6 starts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. There's been some good, there's been some bad, and I think it kind of leads to a more average product. And so I think when you look at his games, you get the first Giants game, went back and watched that last night, and I was really impressed. I think you saw a version of Jayden Daniels from the year before, right? You got some big completions to Debo. You got a guy who understands when to scramble. The Giants played a lot more zone coverages, and you just felt like he was just picking them apart. It was really fun to watch. Then you walk up in that to that Packers game, and it was just a totally different animal. Like, it was the amount of quick pressures, the amount of kind of the inability to push the football down the field. They played a little bit more man, tighter match coverage, and it was hard for him. And it was hard for the whole offense. And I think that's kind of been the narrative of the season, because then you go to the next game that he played, which was the Chargers game, and I thought he looked great. He had a little bit of a sputtering start in the first half, but then they get that big completion to Luke down the field. There's the completion to Jalen Lane. There's a deep cross to Debo. He's scrambling. He's maximizing guys. He's got some big-time throws in there. They played a lot more zone, and I felt like he looked really comfortable. The offensive line did a great job in pass protection of maximizing him. And again, then you go to the Bears, thought a very solid performance in that one. Obviously, though, that game's marred by the 2 turnovers, right? The interception in the red zone and the late fumble, which again, but outside of those 2 plays, and you can't do that, obviously, but outside of those 2 plays, I thought he looked excellent, and the offense looked excellent. Then you get to the Cowboys game, a lot of pressure, tough time, and then Seattle, which again, the pressure that Seattle was able to bring was really high. So I think I say all that to kind of get back to this main point, which is that I think he's played about the same as he did last year. I think his warts, or some of the issues that he had as a quarterback last year, are going to be exacerbated. And what I mean by that is he's never been a great navigator of the pocket, which is a skill. And there are certain quarterbacks that are bad at it and certain quarterbacks that are good at it. There are good quarterbacks that are bad at it. So this is not a nail in the coffin. But I do think he's not a subtle pocket mover. So when there are quick pressures, when there is when there's pressure just in general, he's going to kind of make these big movements to get out and escape the pocket and scramble. And so I do think when you watch teams like, again, the Seattles, the Packers, the Cowboys, in those games specifically, you feel some of that issue. And I think that's one of the reasons that Adam Peters goes out and invests a first-round pick in an offensive lineman. You bring in Laramie Tunsil, is to help kind of offset some of that issue for him. But I do think you see that that was something you saw last year. I think you see it more this year because you're seeing him play against better defenses.
Yeah, I wonder too, there's just an inconsistency all year, stopping and starting, to him being on the field. And yeah. I can't help but think that's not a game changer. You went through it, but anecdotally to me, I think the second half of the Chargers game was the best he's looked. I thought that was quite literally 2024 Jayden Daniels, top of the league. There's a handful of guys that can make some of those plays. That play on the move to Debo Samuel is just to drop it in the bucket. Looked like it would fit in that virtuoso Detroit Lions playoff performance that he had. I thought he was very solid in a couple other games as well. The Bears game minus the 2 turnovers I thought was pretty awesome. And then there were some really good things as the game went on against the Giants you referenced in week 1. When he's been pressured, like the Seattle game, it's been very, very different, obviously. But, how much of a factor, if we're doing a pie of, this is why this year has not been on the same level, what % do you ascribe to either injuries being off the field, practice and games, and then also, not to use injuries as an excuse with his supporting cast, but just the lack of time with them in practice? Is that huge. Almost the whole pie, or is there more to it?
It's huge. Like I said, I think there's some issues, the pocket stuff is something that he was going to have to get cleaned up from last year.
Yeah, and by the way, people take offense that he's a second-year quarterback who's played, just over 20 games. Everyone relax.
I'm definitely not trying to light this. I'm definitely not trying to light him on fire. I think he's a good player. He makes some play. Against the Giants, he makes that boot out to the right, and he throws this ball down to Moore on the sideline. You mentioned the completion to Debo in the Chargers game. He had a beautiful completion to Moore versus man coverage where he throws it up for a touchdown. Like, he's still balling, and again, like, the decisions when to scramble are still excellent. I think teams are more aware of his legs now than ever before, so they have plans, right? So they're going to force him to – you're not going to be as effective down to down with the scrambling, which is something that I think really limited the offense's effectiveness when he was in. But to your point, like, we're going to talk about this Kurt Warner thing here in a second, but one of the things that I think is overlooked by the national media when they talk about him locally is just the turnover at the skill position spot. Like, we went to training camp practice. He didn't practice with Terry. He didn't practice with Noah. Debo was the only guy out there. So he's practicing with Noah Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane. Luke McCaffrey's no longer playing because of the collarbone thing, right? It's just the amount of turnover that you get from those offensive position players. Like, it is a timing-based thing. It's a trust-based thing. And, like, one of the things that I'm really grateful for in my job is you get to walk the sideline, and kind of hear what coaches are saying and kind of different coaching points. And the amount of times this year where, like, the quarterback or the receiver coach is like, hey, man, we got to be in a better spot for you here, right? And again, Tavita says stuff to them too about, hey, we got to make a better throw. Like, it's a give and take. But I do think that when you're working with new pieces in new spots, that's something that's going to continuously come up. It's just you're not on the same page. And that applies to the receivers. It also applies to the offensive line. Like, look at the game against Green Bay, like, where, you got Allegretti starting, you got Coleman starting. The next week they turn that over, right? And then that turns over one more time when Cosme comes back. And that happens against the Cowboys, right? So I do think that, like, those things, just the constant turnover of the skill position, specifically the turnover on the offensive line. The offensive line is starting to set a little bit and gel, which I think is one of the reasons they've been more efficient the last couple of weeks. But I do think that those are huge factors, right? And then you couple that with the fact that he's been in for 2 games, out for 2 games, in for 2 games, or in for 3 games, out for a game, back for a game. Like, and it's not like a slouch defense. It's like you're going from the Cowboys where you absolutely got shelled because they're blitzing all the time and running all this first down pressure. And then you take a week off and you play maybe the best defense in football. Like, we were just talking about the Broncos, like, Seattle looks excellent, right? So I just think it's the matchups are tougher. The in and out of the lineup for him, the injury at the skills position spots, like, it's not the same ecosystem he was in last year, and I think that's important to recognize.
To that point, Kurt Warner, the future Hall of Fame quarterback, whose work I've always really admired and liked. I mean, he really dives into the tape, and I don't view him as like a hot taker looking for clicks or shouty show. Like, he really is trying to dig in on quarterbacks, and I would say, went pretty hard against Daniels in the Seattle performance. Now, my perception, for the record, was that a lot of things that he was showing and talking about, which were completely fair and true, I thought, were more in that game and not like systematic issues over the entirety of the season or like every week you watch Jayden. But that's another point for another time. What did you make of kind of some of his critiques in terms of holding on to the ball, kind of not seeing it as clean, maybe not being as sure as he was at times last year? And where does that come from?
Yeah, so I mean, it was funny, like, going through watching that, because I don't think Kurt Warner is saying anything that's wrong on an individual play. But what I will say is that the thing that jumped out to me is, like, that's a really hard throw that he's asking him to make. And then the next one is a really hard throw. And the next one's a really hard read. The next one's
that because he's a Hall of Famer watching that tape?
Well, I think this is the thing that I run into when I'm watching film too. It's like one play in isolation, you could ask a guy to win, right? So, like, let's say it's a tough matchup. Like as a tight end, like, hey, I got to block this 6 technique and it's, Cameron Jordan, right? And that's a tough matchup. And if I have to do it 10 times, he's going to win probably 7 of those, right? But I can win it 1 time because we kind of surprise him. The formation's different. The backfield set's different, and he's a little bit slow off the ball, and I can get him. So you're like, yeah, he should probably make that block. But when I'm watching the film, like watching a game, right, or watching a drive even, and you're like, man, like, he missed that block. He missed this block. He missed this block. Talking about a tight end now. You're like, is that fair of me as the coach to ask that he make me right all the time in this really tough matchup? And so when I was listening to the Kurt Warner thing, like, the first one that comes to mind was they ran this boot on the first play of the game. And the defensive end plays out, really nice play by the defensive end. You could tell that was their plan, runs right at the quarterback. The receiver's not quite out of his break yet. And Kurt Warner's like, he should throw to this grass right here. I'm like, I could see that, right? I could see him throwing to the grass. I would get a little bit nervous about it because the corner's kind of fluffed off a little bit. It's covered too. He's got eyes on the quarterback. The receiver's not as deep as I want him to be to kind of maximize the grass. But could he make this throw? Yeah, he could. So that's one. Go to the next one. It's like, hey, we got a pressure. We got a 4-man pressure. They run a stunt to the offensive right. There's a guy right in his face. I want him to kind of do a quick lateral step and drill this dig on a rope. Okay, cool. So, but when you go back to back to back like that, is that reasonable that I am asking him to make this offense go with?
In other words, like a few of those maybe, but to be perfect on every play, the way I say it is you're chasing a ghost. It's an imperfect position. You're going to miss throws. You're going to miss plays. I think that's a really good way to look at it. The other thing, and I'll tag you back in on this, I will say about the Warner breakdown. In real time watching that game, that was how I felt. And the reason we're bringing this up, I guess, is it's the last time he's played. And so we're going to see how he comes out of this. But I felt like, and it's not a big knock. It happens sometimes with younger guys. He just wasn't taking the layups. Yeah. And, just keep the ball moving. I am such a proponent of completions, right? That is, I'm not saying I'm right, but this is like my philosophy and my axiom for quarterback play is like, keep the ball moving. The guy that I talked to the most over the years and have kept in touch with is Kirk Cousins. And he basically turned his entire career around based on sitting down with Jay Gruden watching tape once and Jay going through 2 Tom Brady performances that everybody heaped all this praise on Tom Brady for. Comeback wins. And they went through the tape. He said, let's stop the tape when he makes a big time throw that you'd struggle to make. And they never stopped the tape. And he's like, just take what they give you. Like, do the thing, man. And so his whole career has been this axiom of not going broke, taking a profit, and look at all the money he's made. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't make big-time big boy throws. Of course he does. But, like, just take the layups. And I felt like in that game he was turning them down. I don't post these on social anymore because it just comes off as, like, too hot to take, and everyone gets so offended. And as you said, like, you can always find a clip. I could screen grab and make people, say, oh, why didn't you do this? But, like, I kind of put together a little bit of the same kind of deal after Seattle where I'm like, why not do this, this, this? So I get where Kurt Warner is coming from. I just wonder how much of it was a one-game issue where you're getting destroyed. Like, he was pressured 50% of snaps. You might have just gotten kind of spooked and out of a rhythm in that game, and that doesn't mean it carries over. Has that been the issue over many games? I would say no.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that I really felt in that game too, was like, look at who, and again, this is not, this sounds like I'm being mean. Like, I am this guy. I'm this guy that I'm about to talk about and kind of be critical of. Like, you need these guys in the NFL, and these guys have carved out great careers, but you're not throwing to the guys you thought you'd be throwing to, right? And so that comes with a couple different things. Like, Traylon Burks had been there for 2 weeks. And I think Traylon Burks, like, talk about a guy I'm excited to watch play football. Traylon Burks is at the top of that list. However, like, you could tell there's like some route depth issues, angles on cuts, and you're like, how comfortable as the quarterback would you be throwing to this guy that's been here for 2 weeks, right? 1 week on practice squad, 1 week active, and now we're letting it rip, right? And I think, like, that's another thing that comes up with the Kurt Warner stuff too, and some of this stuff. It's like, if the guy I'm throwing to is not in the spot I'm expecting, I can't be anticipatory with my throw. So even though the guy's open, am I ready? Is my footwork ready? Is the timing off? Like, all those things compile. So let's take that game. Let's say 15% of it is throwing to new people. Then you get the pressure thing. And I think the one thing that is true here of this season, and it was true last year, is when he is pressured, he starts pressing a little bit, right? He wants to be Superman. Like, you mentioned the completion thing. Like, when he sits back there, the offensive line's in a good spot, he will absolutely dissect you. Like, he will dissect you in a way that is so unique to him. Obviously, we saw it last year with how productive he was as a rookie, but look at the Green Bay game. Like, I'd say, again, Green Bay did a great job, not only with the pressure, but also tight coverage. I also think Seattle did a great job with pressure and tight coverage, but there are times, like you're talking about, where, like, hey, let's just get the ball to the back. Or, hey, like, the check down's coming open, let's get on base with this completion. And so, yes, that is a part of it also. But again, like, I go back to my original kind of thought here with Kurt Warner is it reasonable? Is it reasonable that I'm asking you to do that, 25 times in a game? Like, I don't think so, with the pressure rate being what it is. And so that's where I'd say, that's where I'm trying to give him a little bit of grace. Like, those 2 games specifically, Green Bay and the Seattle game, were absolutely diabolical in terms of pressure, right? Like, it was just like quick pressures, 4-man rushes, great match coverage, like across the board. And so any quarterback, I would argue, is going to have a hard time with that skill position group versus that level of pressure in those games. And you look at it like the Seattle game is the worst game of the year for the offensive line. The other worst game is the Green Bay game. And so it doesn't surprise me that a guy who that those games he struggled the most. Now, the game that I would kind of point to and say, hey, we got to be better is the Cowboy game, because there's a couple of drops in that game. There's a couple incompletions that were very uncharacteristic of him. But again, that to me seems like the outlier in this course of this season. And to me, I also think that that was such a departure from what Matt Eberflus did before. Like, he's this zone, soft coverage guy, and all of a sudden they're playing a ton of man and blitzing his face off. Like, I feel like they weren't quite ready for what.
Hold him a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, one other thing I would add, just to back your point up with some numbers, is he was pressured 25 times in 52 dropbacks in that Green Bay game. And then he was pressured 20 times and 35 dropbacks in the Seattle game. So the highest pressure rate, over 50%, was the Seattle game. But those two games collectively, 45 of the 86 pressures that he's faced in 6 games came in those 2 games, which speaks to something. All right, I want to get into some possible tweaks for the offense, or really just something I've been stewing on for a few weeks that I want to bounce off you kind of schematically and X's and O's. We'll do that next. It's Take Command, Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen getting ready to get back to work here for the Commanders as they get ready for the Broncos on Sunday Night Football. Welcome back to Take Command. He's Logan. I'm Grant. Watch us 106.7 The Fan, Team 980 YouTubes. Listen to us wherever you get your audio. Please subscribe, rate, review, comment, do all that stuff, and send the pod to a friend. That always means a lot to us. We appreciate getting new people to listen to Take Command as the season goes on. So, Logan, I have been beating this drum now for weeks. We talk a lot on the show about some of the offenses that we watch that come in here to play the Commanders. I think Seattle, among others, that are in like heavy 12 and 13 personnel, and they've play action on early downs, and they operate from under center. And Washington is now dead last in the NFL at operating from under center. They were 31st. They were the penultimate team in this category. But after Kirk Cousins started for the Falcons this week and got to beg his coordinator probably all week long to help him out by getting under center, they actually had the highest 13 personnel under center percentage of any team in the league this season. They had run 3 plays all year where they had 13 personnel under center, and they did it on like 60% of their snaps this week. They just completely went against the grain, and Cousins clearly had, some say in how they were operating post-Penix with him now injured. But I say that to bring up, prior to that, going into this week, it was like Washington and Atlanta almost in a dead heat. So now the Commanders are 32nd in percentage. If you look at some of the numbers on this, the teams, this was going into last week, I think the last numbers I had, I could look them up, but I jotted them down. Seattle was number 1 in the league at 70%. Obviously, Darnold is playing great. The Rams at 69%. Matt Stafford's going to win the MVP. The Lions at 52%, 40-plus points on Washington. Really, really good offensively. Goff having another big year. The Bills at 51%, which is interesting because Josh Allen, you think of being in the gun and running some power and, being a dual-threat quarterback. And then Drake May and the Patriots were 5th. Last check at 47% with Josh McDaniels. The bottom 5 teams are the Saints, the Bengals, the Chiefs with Mahomes, the Commanders, and the Falcons. So I ask you this. I've got a bunch of questions, and I've got some
real quick questions. That's total number of under center snaps, right?
Correct. Percentage, a percentage of snaps under center, not total. So to account for, somebody might run 1,000 plays, somebody might run 600. But how often does their coordinator line them up under center? So my question to you is, number 1, is this something Washington should possibly try to do more of? We've seen some 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, like play action boots that have worked. And then second, you describe it better than I do, and I'll give some thoughts if there's something I want to add. But what is the benefit? When a guy like Dan Orlovsky's on TV every day evangelizing under center play and saying if you don't run under center plays enough, you're not going to get to the Super Bowl, and these things that he's talking about as a former quarterback. Like, what is the infatuation that people like I have with under center offense?
Yeah. Okay. So 2 things I want to talk about real quick. One is I think it's important to understand the context behind that statistic. So I haven't watched enough, LA, Seattle, Bills film to kind of be locked in on this, but I don't think it's an accident that the top teams in the NFL are some of the top teams you described are top offenses, and the bottom teams are some of the worst offenses, right? And so the first thing I want to say is that is also, to me, reflective somewhat of game flow, right? So, like, as you get into a game, you're playing with a lead, you're going to be under center a little bit more to run the football, right? Like, that's just a fact, right? So if you're a team that's playing with a loss or playing from behind, you're going to be in the gun a little bit more. You're going to throw the ball, like 2-minute situations, end of game 2-minute, right? Like, that's going to skew that way a little bit just because of score.
I wonder if I could dig on, like, first 3 quarters, early down kind of stuff.
It would have to be like first and second down. Like, I think would be a better indicator of some of that, like over the course of the game, kind of, for example. But just wanted to throw that out there because, like, it's not a coincidence that good teams, like, they tend to have slightly higher run rates because they're playing with better scores. Blah 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 blah.
But I will say, as a Shanahan disciple, such as you are, like, you also know that the teams in there, like McVay and Kubiak and Ben Johnson now, even though Caleb Williams had single-digit snaps under center in his college career, is doing this at a much higher rate this year, and that's where his explosives are coming from. Like, you can kind of see it, right? It's a binary. There's teams that do it, and there's teams that don't, and the Commanders are one of the teams that don't.
Yeah, so I guess what I'd say is, like, so when you look at some teams, like, I think a good example is I just saw a play like this the other day. So people probably talking about the Denver Broncos. I was doing my Denver Broncos prep, and what they did is, like, they're in the pistol, the back's in the dot. They have a fullback offset right next to the quarterback, and what they did is they cut the snap, turned around, put the ball out. The running back runs downhill. He turns back around. It's a play action pass. That, to me, is just as effective as going from under center. So, like, what you're trying to do to the defense is hide the ball for a second, right, on play action, right? So, like, think about it. When I'm under center, I have the ball. The quarterback has the ball in his hands. He's got 3 or 4 steps where he's leading to the back on outside zone, on power, on counter. The defense has to respect that 3 steps, right? So while that 3 steps is happening, the route combination is distributing, right? So, 1, 2, pull the ball in. That's time that the linebackers have not dropped to their positions traditionally, right? I know a lot of backs prefer running from the dot because you can get downhill, get your shoulders square. That cut is a little bit easier. Think about, like, when I'm getting that handoff coming across, specifically in the gun, right? I have to go lateral and then transition downhill. Imagine if I could just be downhill the whole time. I can generate speed, generate momentum, and kind of work that one cut off of that. I do think, however, like, the things that you get from that, you can also get, I think, from pistol specifically, and also get from just backfield action. You're just trying to hold it, just trying to hide it. And I think when you watch, like, the Kansas City Chiefs are a good example of this. When you watch Miami, again, that offense is struggling this year, but historically, like, they run most of their stuff from the pistol, and they do a lot of, like, what I would call spin, hide the ball. Quarterback's got his back to the defense for a second. You've got 2 guys coming kind of in motion near the quarterback. Who's got the ball? It freezes the linebackers. You pull a guard. Everyone steps up. Quarterback turns around and then throws a glance, right? So I do think there are ways to structure your offense to hide, to get the same benefit, right? So I think people look and say, oh, that's the thing. It's under center, right? But you can do other things to get there. And so
you think that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to clarify. You think that the pistol it can be essentially the same as being under center? Because I want to read you a quote here from Josh McDaniels,
go ahead,
who is a big proponent of this and one of the guys that I've followed on this. He said, I've never really wanted to be gun because I do think there's an element of predictability. He was asked about the gun and the pistol as opposed kind of what we're talking about. He said, if the back is offset, then it affects the type of runs you can run. You don't necessarily have the same ability to go in both directions. Not that you can't, but it's just not the same. You don't have the same angles, and the defenses know it. Sometimes they'll set their fronts accordingly when your back is offset in the shotgun to try to stop the things that they know are coming in the running game. I think play action passes have always been better under center than in the gun. To me, the time it takes from the ball to be snapped for the ball to leave the belly of the back is really where you want the defense to get out of position. It takes longer for that to happen when you're under center as opposed to when you're in the shotgun because it's a really quick fake, and now the quarterback has the ball and everybody sees it. So they're not as distorted in the coverage end of it, too. I just think there's more versatility. I think there's definitely some things relative to the running game and play action game that are improved by being under center. Honestly, for me, part of it is just kind of the mindset of being able to be under center and run the football, turn around, hand it off, try to go downhill with it. Some of those things are important, especially when The weather starts to change in New England. I've spent most of my career here. Cold weather, windy situations, rain, snow, snapping the ball 65 times in the gun can be a problem. Your thoughts on any of that?
So he didn't say anything that I disagreed with or that I'm not aligned with there. Like when you're in true gun, back offset, right or left, yeah, like you're limited in what you can do, right? There are certain things you can do to get around it, right? But like, think about it. Usually the back runs across your body, right? So defenses will check their front, check coverages even based on where the back's positioned, especially on early downs, right? You can do some same side pitch stuff. We saw that versus Detroit with that Jahmyr Gibbs late touchdown, but it's not as effective, right? Like the surface is different, the counts are different, the angles are different, right? So what I'm saying is like when you watch Miami, they get to some of the same play action, because what's he talking about ultimately there? It's timing and hiding the ball, right? When you're under center, it naturally happens, right? Your back's to the defense. Think about your Peyton Manning, one arm out type of deal, Tom Brady, one arm out. Jake the Snake, one arm out type of play action, ball fake there. The linebackers have to respect it.
Did you say Jake Plummer?
Did you go
Manning, Brady, Plummer right there? I love that.
Because I think about him because we used to watch all the cut-ups of him with Mike, right? Like he was with him.
Mike Shanahan loved Jake Plummer. He did. Like he cited him like 3 or 4 times to me about different things over the years. He loved him.
Yeah. So again, like because of the ability to do this ball fake and get to the perimeter off play action, what I'm saying is if you're in the pistol, it's very, very similar, right? But you get some of the benefit of what we've talked about here with Jayden Daniels. You can still run RPO, you can still run zone read, you can still get the back down, you can hide the football. And I think like if you want a creative, like this is more like coach stuff. This is more like innovative things. But if you watch Miami, they do all this stuff in terms of holding linebackers and moving linebackers from the gun. They just have different ways of getting to the backfield action. They've been more creative. So when you talk about Mike McDaniels, like he's more traditional in terms of his approach under center. But I think there are ways. You just got to think about it differently. And it takes time. It takes verbiage. And how much time do you want to put on that stuff? Probably not that much because, again, that's the whole genesis for the offense in Miami. But, yes, I do think there are benefits to going under center. I think you can get to some of those benefits in different backfield sets. You just have to be creative about it, right? Because ultimately, like, what's the goal? You want to hide the football. How do you hide the football? Like, you spin, you have the quarterback just stand there like Statue of Liberty style while someone runs across, jet sweep action. Some of that stuff, if you watch NFL football, does the same thing to defenses. It's just you have to be a little bit more innovative and creative with that stuff than traditional under center play action pass game or keeper or boot or whatever you want to call it.
I wonder, in watching Atlanta this year, who runs pistol more than anybody, they struggle immensely with their play action game. And so I've kind of assumed that to be corollary. Yeah. But there's other teams that run pistol a lot that I could watch that maybe have a better play action game.
So if you're talking about Atlanta, like one things that they do is they pitch their outside zone quite a bit from pistol, which is hard because it's hard for the quarterback to catch a snap and then run to the spot because the angle is a little bit steeper. But if you watch guys who like catch the snap and then run to the intersection point, you get the same effect from the defense, right? It just is harder for the quarterback to get there, especially with a guy like Penix, who's maybe not super efficient with like the ball handling, or Kirk, who's got the ankle Achilles injury. Like some of that stuff's a little bit more challenging. It requires a touch more athleticism from the pistol because the angle and the intersection point is tighter to the
So I guess then my question, so you wouldn't be under center more if you were Washington?
So again, this is the thing that I have a hard time when I hear this question. It's like, what do you want the offense to be, right? Like that's the question you come to. Like,
so I want the offense to be more of a play action shots, middle of the field, pop passes. I want it to look more like Detroit, Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco, LA. What works at a really high clip in the NFL.
So I would say, like, if you look at this offense last year, this was one of the best offenses in the league, right? Last year.
Well, and by the way, if the offense was still humming like it was last, you didn't hear me complaining about structure last year.
But what I would say though too is that like you got to think about your personnel and what maximizes those guys, right? Are you a team that's gonna like bang your head against the wall with outside zone or what? It's an identity question, right? I think both work. You just have to put time in on it, right? Like there are time. Like look at I think the Kansas City Chiefs. That's been one of the better offenses in the NFL the last couple of years, right? This year's probably a down year for them, but they're in the gun all the time. They run a ton of zone read, ton of RPO, ton of like kind of these gun traditional college runs because that fits what they want to be and what Patrick Mahomes wants to be, right? And so what I would say is like, what do you think Jayden Daniels can do? I think you can go under center if you want, right? Also, like, what's your coordinator comfortable with? I think that's another thing that's important here, right? Like he's built this kind of spread, I'm going to air raid principle offense, right? On the hurry up, on matchups, like sometimes that's easier to see from the gun because you have a better vantage point of what's going on out there, especially when you're moving in the hurry up. So again, like to me, it's really preference, and I think both can work. Both can work at a high level. We've seen that historically. Again, I think right now the one that is kind of the quarterback insulator more is the under center stuff for sure. But again, like I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. It's like how you coach it, how you install it, what you want to emphasize, and then how you get to those things, right? So that's where I'd kind of look at it and say, like, you want it to look a certain way, but like there's a million ways to skin a cat. And if you invest and do things
but if you were skinning a cat, I would just shut up and let you skin a cat.
Yeah,
you know
get after it, right?
They haven't really been skinning the cat, I guess, to use the parlance. But that's where people can use, surmise why that is. You could talk about players, whatever. The good news is we're going to get a much better look here down the stretch because Terry McLaurin should be back. Noah Brown's window just opened. There's going to be games, it looks like, where Daniels is playing behind the full offensive line, barring more injuries, which this season, God knows. But McLaurin, Noah Brown, Deebo Samuel, your entire running back room, your entire tight end room, like they're going to have their guys. So that part will be gone. It'll be everybody that they're supposed to have. And, we'll be able to see if they can get this thing back on track. But I just think in general, the hardest thing to do in the league sometimes is just a straight drop back game for quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
And you just ask Jayden Daniels to just drop back in the gun constantly. I think there's easier answers you can get him the way that, Caleb Williams is being asked to make some throws in the middle of the field on the digs and daggers and crosses and stuff. And I just want to see that incorporated more. Like when you see Sam Darnold's growth this year with how they're doing it, I just think there's easier ways to live to make Jayden's life a little bit easier, whoever your personnel is.
So what I would say is you look at the Giants game, you look at the Chargers game, like two of his better games this year. He's throwing the ball on deep crosses over the middle of the field, right? And so, again, like...
I'm not saying they never do. They just don't do it as much as other teams.
Yeah, well, like, this is what I'm saying. It's like there are ways in this offense where they get to that stuff, right? And I think, like, this is where offensive philosophy and offensive perspective is so nuanced and varied. And if you believe in something, like, do it, right? So I think, like, yeah, like I'm a Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay guy, right? Like that's what I feel more comfortable with. But I do see the value of some of the stuff they're doing. And I do think that, like, even if you were running a lot of under center drop, like play action drop, like this offense was going to struggle because they didn't have the playmakers on the perimeter, right? So like that's where it's like it's really hard to know like where they're at offensively because of the injuries. Like we talked about Jayden Daniels' development and being affected by the injuries. I also think it's hard to know like you didn't have any quality perimeter pieces to make this thing go. And so that's where I also look at it and say, like, is it a fair evaluation of the offense? But like we've talked about, off air, on air, like I understand where you're coming from with this, but I also want to be flexible mentally and say to myself, like, there are offenses that are successful being more open and being more spread out. And
to Cliff's credit, I want to give him some love here too. I mean, they're a top 10 offense in the league right now, right? They're 10th in yards per play. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but they are. And they're fourth running the football, yards per play. They're just outside of the top 10 throwing the football. I think they're 13th. So with all those injuries and some of the stuff that they've had to deal with, I'm not sitting here saying it's been bad. It certainly hasn't been. I'm just always looking for, I think good offense is evolution, right? It's like tweaks, and that's part of the fun of it. But we're going to get to see them a lot healthier, which is a big, big deal, to your point, down the stretch. All right, we can look at the defensive side of the ball. And speaking of the stretch run, Logan, 6 games to go. Sunday Night Football with the Broncos coming up. I know you're going to have a film preview for us on Denver coming up on Thursday. But I do just want to look at the road ahead here with you, if you don't mind, and try to figure out, like, what should we be caring about as Commanders fans? And what guys have a chance to really change the perception going into next year? So let's do that next on Take Command. Welcome back, Take Command. Logan Paulsen played a decade in the NFL. Grant Paulsen with you. We come your way 3 episodes a week, every single week. All right, Logan, let's get ready for the stretch run here. We will have a full preview of the Broncos game coming up. Needless to say, though, back on primetime, Sunday Night Football, going to be very, very difficult to take on the best defense in the NFL off of a bye week. Washington's going to have to really bring their A game coming up on Sunday night.
Yeah, we'll talk about them more in detail in a little bit, but I do think that the one thing about Denver, like defense is incredible, coverage is incredible, rush is incredible, is they are okay getting into one-score games. Like they're okay offensively. Sean Payton is like leaning on his defense, trusting the defense to play good football, and then kind of offensively finding that one explosive play here on third down, getting this big completion down the field, getting an explosive run on explosive play off a screen. So while this seems like a lot, and it's going to be a gross game, I'm very confident, in terms of defensive production. Offensively, they're not going to stress you the way some of these other teams we've played have. So if they let you stick around, last possession, maybe you got a shot.
The road ahead I mentioned I wanted to look at. You got 2 winnable games on the other side of the Broncos. Obviously it's the NFL and maybe you knock off Denver as well. But the Vikings are making a quarterback change based on J.J. McCarthy having concussion symptoms right now. He's really struggled. Then you're at the Giants. Speaking of concussions, Jackson Dart's missed a couple in a row. Jameis Winston has been fun to watch, but he'll keep both teams in the game. Then you finish with 2 against the Eagles and the Cowboys. So 4 straight division games to wind down the season. I'm curious, Logan, what types of things in what is kind of a lost year now at 3-8, where you're on to the offseason in a lot of ways mentally as a fan. What are you watching here? How much does the result of these games, win-loss, the numbers in these games matter to you? And kind of where's your mindset as an evaluator the rest of the way?
Yeah, I think obviously you're out evaluating individual personnel, kind of to see who's going to be around long term, who's someone you could build around. I think Jordan McGee, just as an example that fans are really familiar with, like defensively is a guy that's jumped out. Like, can he continue to grow in a larger role? Right, a receiver like Treylon Burks when he's healthy, like we saw flashes of him. Was that in the Detroit game? I can't even remember now. Detroit game, and like. Former first-round pick, big, long, dexterous kind of player. Like, is there a role for him kind of opposite Terry McLaurin next year? And I really can't wait to see Jayden Daniels get back in the saddle here versus some teams where it's going to be a little bit more competitive. Like, you don't have to score 50 points to win the game. Can he do some of the things we talked about? Just be a little bit more patient. Don't put the cape on too early. And just trust this offensive line, trust the receiving group to support him. So I think there's a bunch of stuff, right? Defensively, I think the number one thing for me, kind of a first and foremost, is like, can we just be more efficient like we were against Miami, like we were against LA? Like, that's going to be a big part of it too.
So that's my number one kind of big picture storyline on defense is just, did they solve something in Madrid? I don't know how they played as well as they did on that travel week after as bad as it was the couple weeks before that. But it was a very, very different defense. And all of a sudden you go, I could live with this. I could do this for the rest of the season. Was that a one-off? Was that Tua missing some things and the Dolphins being a level down? Was it just a get-right game where you were kind of due to play better? Or did they solve the riddle? Did they figure some things out? Like, I can't wait for them to play football again. And also, let's face it, the Broncos, Bo Nix makes a few plays to win some games late, but that is not a great offense. They present some problems, but it's a very average offense. The Vikings, you might be seeing a third-string quarterback at the start of the year start that game. Right. Then you got the Giants. It's not like you're playing the Dolphins and the Lions and the Seahawks and the Chiefs here on the Murderers Row. So, this is a chance for the defense maybe coming out of a bye. They're getting healthier. They're going to get Will Harris back, it sounds like, according to Dan Quinn, at safety. I think this will be a chance to see them play much better than they have.
And I think that's exactly what I'm hoping for, right? Is that just can you be a little bit more consistent? And there have been games where they've been better. You know what I mean? Like, I look at the Giants game. Obviously, that offense isn't anything to kind of write home about. The Chargers game, obviously banged up offensive line for the Chargers, and then obviously Miami. So there has been a little bit of kind of like peak valley here for the season. But can you string 2 games together defensively? Like, that'll be a big deal for me, And I think it all seems repeatable, right? A little bit more zone coverage, understanding pressures and when to throw them, how to disguise coverages, all those different things seem like things that they can get better at. And, obviously the personnel issues at defensive end are still going to be there, but like, can you just play that level of defense for 4 quarters? And I think it's a reasonable expectation. And it's something that gets me a little bit excited for the back half, because you were talking about winnable games. Like, I personally think you could win both Philly games, just because of the state of that locker room, the state of the roster. I think the Cowboys are going to be tough because of how well they're playing from a skill position standpoint, but it's a division game. You never know. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic for the back half of this season because of the stuff we've seen from the defense. Seems like we're getting healthy. I don't want to say at the right time, because it sounds like we're going to make this push into the playoffs, but we're getting healthy in time to kind of see the offense, see the team as it was supposed to look at the beginning of the season.
And to me, that's going to be such a key, because I have dismissed many of kind of what's happened and the setbacks and the issues where they've struggled as, well, they just didn't have the horses. And you're going to get a lot of them back. So if they play at a pretty high level and they look a little more like they did last year, I think you go into the offseason feeling way better. Feeling like, okay, this was just a year that was ravaged by injury. You also mentioned the eval of the kids. And lastly, I'll say some of the guys I'm locking in on. I liked your call on Jordan McGee. He's been a fun watch. Defensively, Johnny Newton has a sample down the stretch here to try to elevate his game and what you've kind of dubbed like his rookie year, in a sense, because of the injuries last season. I want to see more out of him. Mike Sanders still, especially if he's getting bounced back outside full time now to corner, which it looks like is probably the way forward. Does he play at a high level like he did last year at that position? And then what does that mean in the offseason for just keeping him out there versus having him return to the nickel? Mm-hmm. And then lastly, on offense, I'll give you 2. Bill got off to such a fast start this year, has not been the same the last several weeks. I don't know that that's his fault, but you want to see him flash again, get back right. And then I would throw Ben Sinnott in there as well. There's got to be a way to just, if these games really are about development, at some point, let's call his number. Let's run some plays for him. Let's operate in 12-13 personnel and go boot and try to get him the ball in space, doing some of the things he does well. Because, it's not a preseason game, but if in week 15, you're eliminated, why shouldn't you see what Ben Sinnott is? So those are some of the things I want to see.
I think that's spot on. The other one I'd throw in there, just in addition to the guys you said, was just Josh Connerly. Does he continue to progress, right? And Jalen Lane, if he's healthy coming out of the bye, can he continue to develop as a receiver, like we talked about on the draft class review show that we did? So I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited and optimistic and things to be engaged with as a fan. The other thing I'd say is Jayden Daniels, get him back out there. Let's start seeing something that was more akin to last year. We just talked about kind of some of the, offensive intricacies in terms of gun versus under center. Can we get back to looking like they did last year when they were really rocking and rolling? So those are all things that I'm looking forward to see, to watching down the stretch here.
Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen on Take Command. Good convo. A lot to chew on there, I think, for people going into return to play here for the Commanders and return to practice for Jayden Daniels. All right, next time you hear from us will be Thursday. We're looking ahead to the Denver Broncos in primetime on Sunday Night Football. For our producer, Evan, and for Logan, I'm Grant saying so long. Thanks for checking us out on Take Command.